Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started here. Thank you guys all so much again for being here. My name is Gia Lombardi. I've been at Denver Water for almost 9 years, along with my lovely colleague B. Stratton here, who's going to be presenting today. I also have my colleague Sarah Behunick, who's going to be presenting, and our keynote speaker, Eryn Murphy. Let's see. Ooh, it's a magic wand. There it goes, it's awake. This is our lovely Eryn, who's going to be speaking today. Some info about her DIY guide and the DIY guide for doing some landscape transformation. So if you're interested in the work that she's put together here, you want to take a quick minute to scan that QR. I'm just going to give you like 7.2 seconds to get your phone out and scan it. Okay, that was 7.2. Did you get it? Okay, I'll give you 3.9 more. It's not working? Oh, well, don't worry. We will get it for you at the end. It's 2025, and you know technology is just a little still weird. We will figure it out. Awesome. We want to do this land acknowledgement to speak to the space that we're in here. So I'm going to read this for us. We acknowledge that we are gathered on the traditional territory and ancestral homelands of the Cheyenne, Arapaho, and Ute nations. This region was also the site of trading, hunting, gathering, and healing for many other tribes, including the 48 contemporary indigenous tribes and nations who have historically called Colorado home. We recognize that these lands and waters and historical, cultural, and spiritual significance for the indigenous peoples who are the original stewards of this land. Their knowledge, resilience, and cultural and spiritual ties to this land inspire us to continue their legacy by taking care of the environment, advancing environmental stewardship, providing equitable access, and nurturing relationships with the diverse communities we serve. We honor the enduring presence and resilience of the indigenous communities in this region, including a painful history of displacement, marginalization, and attempted erasure of indigenous experience that continues to shape our community today. As we gather here today, we look forward to the future as we acknowledge the past. Thank you. Awesome. A few housekeeping things before we get into this. I would like to acknowledge that you are on it was built 2020, this brand new campus that we're on, and you are in the most historical building on this campus called Three Stones. It was built in the late 1800s and was originally a pump station. And as you can tell, it has been retrofitted. I do not believe that they had projectors and screens and microphones back in the 1800s. But thank you again for being here. If we have an emergency of any sort, there's an exit out of these doors here and an exit out of the back. Do not go out the middle. Lunge to the other sides. Everybody goes out. Awesome. And we will meet in the parking garage if there is some sort of emergency. We're going to have questions saved until the end. We will have a Q&A time. So if you have a question, please write it down on your note sheet and save it for either for Sarah, B, or Eryn at the end. We are going to have a limited time for that Q&A, and then we have to kind of wrap this up and move people out of here and have people out by 12:30. The presentation is going to end about 12. So we will give you contact information if for some reason we can't get to your question. We will give you our direct emails so we can get that done for you, okay? Awesome. Can you please silence your phones also if you have a cellular device? We don't want the ding-ding-ding-ding-ding-ding-ding going off during the middle of the presentation. And we also have a wonderful AV company here today, Cloudwave. Adam, who's in the back, he kind of looks like Wizard of Oz back there, his hand waving, who's going to be recording this entire presentation. And it will be uploaded onto YouTube into denverwater.tap. So if you miss any information, you want to go back, it will be available in about a month. And that also includes our previous 3 workshops that we have done are also on our YouTube. So this workshop has been done before. Eryn has so kindly give us a little jazz and pizzazz to update it, so it's going to be slightly different. And then we have a pollinators and people workshop that is also up on our YouTube for you to check out. If anybody has a child with them and if we need you to take your child to the restroom, we will have that person come in and grab you. So just keep an eye out for that. And we are going to have a break around 11-ish. I'm kind of going to bump that back a little bit, but we'll do a break for bathrooms at around 11 for more food. And we have 2 wonderful giveaways happening today. So that first one will happen at the very end of the first break, and then the second one's going to happen at the end of the presentation. Awesome? Wonderful. I'm going to stop blabbering, and I'm going to invite Bea and Sarah up here to talk about our Denver water landscape transformation. Thank you.
I know Gia said this, but we have never had a full room in here. So the kind of path of getting to this point has been like, oh, we'll put it at 120, and then 120 people will sign up and 60 people show up. Oh, we'll bump it to 150. Then 70 people show up. And so we bumped it up to 200 this time, and you all really showed out. So thank you. We were just expecting a lot of people to wake up this morning and want to stay in the bed. So forgive us for having to rush around for chairs. This has never happened. So I'm like elated that we're this full. But I am Bea Stratton, so I manage our landscape transformation program at Denver Water, and the primary focus of my job is creating resources and support tools for people like you to conserve water through their landscapes. So I'm really excited to be offering these workshops, to have expertise from Eryn and all the other people that come to participate in this, and just to share the knowledge of how important climate resilient landscaping is in such a place where water is scarce and it's so precious. So I want to talk to you a bit about what the landscape of today is, and we're going to dig into why landscape transformation is important for Denver Water, what our program goals are, some of our program offerings so that you know how to get to those resources. And then I'm going to talk to you a little bit about my own personal landscape transformation to give you my DIY experience. And then I'll pass it off to Sarah, who went through our turf replacement program. She was actually one of the very first people who went through the program to talk about her landscape transformation. Clicker works. So why landscape transformation? I mentioned water savings. Obviously, as a water conservation specialist, this is one of the pillars of our program, but there are so many other benefits to caring about your landscape and putting the right landscape in the right place, and really building climate resilience through your landscape. We want to build growing and thriving communities. We want to encourage our customers and empower our customers to engage in these types of landscapes so that as the climate warms, as water becomes more scarce, our landscapes are still vibrant, and we're creating beautiful spaces that are going to last for generations. And then lastly, we think this should be the Colorado way. It's just the right thing to do. I think I've seen, even in my neighborhood, you start to see one landscape transformation, 1 yard on the block, and then another. And then it's like this trickle effect. It's inspirational, it's contagious, and it's honestly more interesting than the monoculture of a Kentucky bluegrass lawn. Clicker. Okay. So I've really been, since I started at Denver Water, trying to work with my team to build thoughtful programming, and I want to be honest with you, we're in pilot mode. We're trying things. We know not everything's going to work. These workshops are part of that pilot mode. It seems like it's going to stick around. This turnout today has me feeling good about continuing doing programming like this. We're also looking at how we're managing our own landscapes. If you weren't aware, Denver Water owns a lot of property throughout the Front Range. We have our own non-functional turf grass. When I say non-functional, I guess I should kind of give you some definition there. That's kind of an industry slang. We're talking about grass that's really only being stood on to be mowed. So big swaths of grass and medians that you see across town, that you'll often see a sprinkler irrigating the road at the same time. This isn't a war on turf. We think that there are practical spaces for Kentucky bluegrass lawns, places where children are playing, places where dogs need to use the restroom and play, parks, athletic fields. But we want to remove that nonsensical turf that's taking so much water from these non-functional spaces. So we've been looking inward, doing assessments for our own non-functional turf and trying to learn from different types of landscape transformations, which I'll share with you in a bit. We're also expanding our offerings, as I mentioned. We're trying to work within communities to build community projects and resilience within disproportionately impacted communities. And we're changing our language, which I'll discuss in just a moment. So Denver Water actually coined the term xeriscape in the 1980s, and it really has become adopted internationally. I think a lot of people in this room are probably familiar with the terminology. But what we've seen, if you look at this photo on the top left, is that people are interpreting xeriscape to mean zero-scape, no plant life. They're ripping out their lawns, they're probably throwing down plastic, which is a huge no-no in my book, and they're dumping a bunch of gravel down, and that's saving water, but it's not achieving the multiple benefits that a well-thought-out, diverse landscape can achieve. So this photo on the bottom right is a little more indicative of what we're talking about. I understand that this is like Botanic Gardens level maintained, and this is not achievable for most homeowners. But I wanted to just compare the stark difference between a landscape that doesn't really provide much benefit, doesn't have much color or diversity, to this beautiful, textural, colorful, diverse environment on the lower right-hand side. So we're working to change our language from xeriscape to Coloradoscape as we're communicating with our customers, because we think it more accurately represents the landscapes that we're talking about. Now, xeriscape isn't dead to us. If people are going to use it and use it correctly and understand it, amazing. But we just don't want it to be interpreted as a barren landscape. So this is my very first landscape transformation that I did at one of our pump stations. We actually removed 1,250 square feet of non-functional bluegrass and installed over 300 low water plants at this pump station. And I just wanted to show these photos to illustrate the kind of sleep, creep, leap, if you've heard of that, just how quickly these plants establish and how amazing this change can be. So the photo on the left is June 2023 when they went in the ground. Photo in the middle is almost a year later. They're looking happy, they're blooming. And then photo on the right is September 2024, and the plants are like almost 4 times the size of when they went in. And they're even bigger now. It's pretty insane, pretty satisfying. And before we even got the plants from the pots into the ground, there were already pollinators buzzing around. So it was just an immediate reward. There we go. So on to the good stuff that you'll be interested about. We have some amazing residential offerings that I think you will be interested in. We rely pretty heavily on Resource Central. They're a nonprofit out of Boulder that offers the Garden in a Box program. That's probably the most popular. So in the spring and late summer every year, Garden in a Box gardens go on sale. We offer a $25 discount on those. They go pretty quick, so if you get on the Resource Central mailing list and order within the first few days of the gardens going on sale, you get a little bit of a discount. We also, as of last year was our first time ever investing in turf removal. So Resource Central has a turf replacement program. You can apply on their website at resourcecentral.org, and they will come to your house, remove the turf, and get rid of it for you. And then you're left with a blank slate and you can put your garden in, which is pretty amazing. Sarah did that, and she's gonna tell you about her experience. But Denver Water will pay up to $750 that will go towards a discount on what you do for your turf removal if you go through the Resource Central program. So this is something I'm super proud of. When I was in grad school, I was researching different landscape transformation programs, and I noticed that Denver Water's peers, Aurora Water, Fort Collins, Colorado Springs Utilities, were all offering these really great incentives on turf removal, and Denver Water wasn't offering that. So it's been kind of a vendetta of mine since I started here to offer this, because I think it's really important. It's one of the biggest barriers for homeowners. And then lastly, we offer free irrigation audits through Resource Central. They're targeted at our highest water-using customers, so it's not widely spread, but there are applications online if you're concerned about your irrigation system and would like to get on a list for an audit. That's something you can also do through Resource Central. I also started a native grass seed program. We're in our second year of that program, and residential customers can get a free bag of native seed that will cover 500 square feet. The mix is buffalo grass and blue grama. It uses about a third the amount of water of Kentucky bluegrass, or less depending on how green you want it to be. It can be left tall and wild if you want a more naturalized look, or you can manicure it more like a traditional lawn. Either way, there are less inputs than Kentucky bluegrass. You're never going to be mowing as much as bluegrass. You're not going to be fertilizing as much, and you're definitely not using as much water. We've closed our form for the year because we're kind of outside of the seeding season, but next spring that application will be back up, and all you have to do is submit a request for a bag of seed. If we determine that your site is appropriate for it, does need full sun, things like that, that we know it'll be successful for you, you can come and pick up a bag of seed for free. So just something I want you to know about. You can get to all this stuff at denverwater.org/conserve, and there is a Coloradoscape tile on our website that you can go to find all these resources. So now I'm going to talk to you about my own DIY on my own property. So I'm going to lay the landscape for you. It's 2022. It's really hot. I've turned off my irrigation. I'm getting the side eye from my neighbors. It's not good. This is what my yard looked like. I didn't have an irrigation system. I was kind of dragging a hose and doing like one of the like rainbow old school like that you jump through watering techniques. And I just decided it was taking too much. So I turned off my water for the season. I let the weeds go crazy, which I'm still paying for today in this little gravel bed that you can see on the photo on the right. So I'm going to give you the before and after. You're going to immediately be satisfied by the next photo, and then we'll go through the process. So this is before, and this is after. So the first photo was 2022. This was 2024, and this is a Google Maps image that made my day. It made my year. I brag about it. I actually have a cutout photo of this on like a little board at my house. It's like a Google Maps photo of my house. But I used Garden in a Box and selected some of my own plants. We dug up the gravel where all those weeds were and had it built a swale to the tree from my downspout to collect water and take it to the tree that is pretty young. And I'm just elated with this landscape. It was pretty immediately satisfying, just like with the Einfeld pump station. There were pollinators immediately, and we'll go through some critter talk in a moment. So this is what my garden looked like 2 weeks ago. So I just want you to know, we're going into fall, so some of the blooms are less vibrant, but the grasses are about to pop. Everything's a lot bigger. The yarrow's really hardy. I think the switchgrass might be my favorite thing in the fall. On the left is giant saccaton grass, and that's just getting really showy, and I think it's going to be outstanding in the next few months. And on the right is rabbit brush, and that is test. Okay, that is a very drought-tolerant shrub that it'll eventually get little yellow blooms on it, and it is stunning in the fall. This was last year. I just want to kind of show off some of the activity on site. So we've had some swallowtail butterflies, Nessus sphinx moths. This plant is Jupiter's beard or red valerian, and I think it's the most popular for pollinators in my yard. This is a little buddy I met 2 weeks ago. This is a European praying mantis, and they're pretty common in Colorado. The two most common mantises in Colorado are non-native, but this little guy surprised me. I moved the chair from my backyard to my front yard, and he was just looking at me, so just wanted to share that. Here's some more activity that I saw this year on my coneflower. Crazy-looking dragonfly that doesn't even look real, and then 3 different species on the same plant at the same time. That was pretty interesting. So how did I do it? I went to Home Depot and I rented a sod cutter. My husband is gone a lot, so he was on tour. I did this by myself, and I rolled up with my CRV and was like, hey, I'll take a sod cutter. And they're like, what are you gonna put it in? And I'm like, my CRV. And they're like, no, you're not. So I was like, well, then give me a truck too. And they're looking at me like I'm crazy. So they helped me get it on the truck. I drive it back to my house. I like go kind of meekly knocking on my neighbor's door, and I'm like, Mark, I'm gonna need some help. And he's like, what is happening? So he helps me get it down, and then he said, wait, how much did you pay for this? And I tell him, and he's like, can I give you half and we'll do my yard too? So my mistake led to 2 landscape transformations, and his yard's looking pretty good too. So this is an example, if you go through the Resource Central Garden in a Box, what the plant list is like. You get these really cool packets with a plant by number kit and just details on how to take care of those plants through the seasons. Here's a breakdown of the cost. Just to kind of give you an idea, Sarah's also going to do her breakdown. I did add an irrigation system for $2,000, which is the bulk of this cost. And I think it's pretty, I did drip in the front because I wanted to be able to efficiently water my plants. You'll see the sod cutter was less than $100. It might be a little more now, but it's really, really affordable if you're willing to put in the sweat equity. And then of course, renting the truck was about $70. I put down some breeze rocks, $300 on plants, and a little bit of mulch. So all in, I was just over $4,000 for that. Here's the real gem of this story. In July of 2020, I used 18,000 gallons of water on my landscape. I was budgeted, when you get your water bill based on the square footage, I should have used about 15. So I was over irrigating in 2020 to 18,000 gallons. In July of last year, after this landscape was mostly established, I used 4,000 gallons. So it's really just an example of how effective this type of water conservation is. Okay, now I'm going to pass it on to Sarah to talk to you about her experience.
Hello. I am Sarah Behunick, and I am a public affairs manager here at Denver Water, but I will be talking to you today from the perspective of just a homeowner with little to no skill doing anything in her yard, but I tend to be kind of someone who will get an idea and jump at it. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some of the resources that I used and how I did it. So this is my house. Unlike B, I had this lush green Kentucky bluegrass. And over on the other side of that walkway is a really big tree, beautiful tree that provides this wonderful shade. But there is a section here highlighted that really, my family wasn't using in any way, shape, or form. It was non-functional. The only time that it was walked on was when it was mowed. And so this was a section that I thought, if I'm gonna try something like this, that would be it, something kind of small and bite-sized. So I went through Resource Central. That's the nonprofit in Boulder that we partner with. And like B said, being a Denver Water customer, I was able to get a $500 discount for applying and removing that turf. I paid $250 for it. What I had to do is fill out a bunch of, boxes online and then submit a plan. And this was my plan. It's just a piece of computer paper, and I drew it out. At that time, I was thinking only a portion of that front area that I wanted to remove. I ended up taking out the whole thing, and that was about 200 square feet. So this is what it looks like, and I believe actually one of these is a video. I'm not sure if we can get that going, but it is, if you saw the picture of Bee's hands, she should have worn better gloves or gloves at all, because it is a very a very rigorous process. But I got to sit on my front porch and watch people who are far more skilled and experienced at this do it, and it took so little time. And also through this process, they kind of do everything. Like they do the 811 locates to make sure that, they're not hitting any electrical lines or water lines or my internet, God forbid. And then They come out, and it probably took, 30 minutes for them to do this. They just rolled it up and hauled it off. And that's another expense that is kind of baked into this, is the hauling away. You can't just like put it in your trash or compost it. Oh, there we go. Okay. So you can kind of see what that actually looks like. All said, if you have the ability, I would highly recommend having Resource Central or another organization, somebody else, do this for you. I think that one of the toughest things for me was the sprinklers. So we do have an irrigation system, and obviously part of this is that I didn't want to use that irrigation system anymore on this area. So I used YouTube. I found Sprinkler Nerd Andy to be the most helpful. And he had all kinds of information about how to cap off your sprinkler systems. So I dug up the little thingamabobs, it's the technical term, and I capped them. And I did this while my now 6-year-old would play in the yard and her 1-year-old brother would be sleeping. So I did this piece by piece by piece. I also went through Resource Central to get the garden in a box. It really is picking plants for dummies. So I got Butterfly Daydream and Mountain Moonlight. And then I picked out a tree that like my neighbor had that I just thought looked so majestic and beautiful and fluffy and kind of magical, and I thought my kids would like. And again, I am not someone who plans very well, so I was like, yeah, I'll just kind of like, I'll grab these and I'll just mix them all together. And so I did, and it took me a while to get all of these. I think this was about 40 plants. It took me a while. I had to do like a few at a time. At one point, I had my husband help dig a hole, and he thought he was getting a tree root, but really went straight through our sprinkler system. And so there's also these delays where then I had to go like YouTube Sprinkler Nerd Andy how to like fix that, and a lot of trips to Home Depot. But it's kind of like it's part of the process. I also got a drip line that I attached, and I snaked it through those different plants. So just kind of like S-ed it through and buried it. And this is the first year. So what you see is what we would still call kind of a sleep phase, but it was getting, like, there are plants that are getting huge, and they are thriving on the drip system and what's just coming down from Mother Nature, even though it has been a very hot and dry summer. But they are doing well, and I would say about 3/4 of the plants lived. So in my book, it's not bad. Part of it too is that I will say this is not maintenance free. So I put down newspaper before putting down some of that gravel, and that really did help. But if I truly want it to be like perfection, I would be out there probably every other week weeding. With 2 young children and a full-time job, it's more like once a month. But you'll see some grass coming through. Obviously, my neighbor has still the, very beautiful green lawn, and so I put down some, like a siding. Gosh, can't remember the name right now, but I got it like really deep, and that was another kind of laborious job. But that grass wants to pop up no matter what. The good thing is that it's easy to pull out. And so overall it was about $1,000. So the turf grass removal, I said $250. It was actually $200. The garden in a box, for 2 of them, $222. I got a $25 discount on each box for being a Denver Water customer. Tree, mulch, fertilizer, $135. The edging, that's it. The garden edging, and that was 8 inches. Like I went all serious about it. Was 177. The rocks was actually one of the larger costs, almost 300. Oh, the drip host, the hose, and stakes to hold those down, 35. The sprinkler cap, $6, and the repair supplies for when I had to fix what my husband had ruined was $8. So all told, it was pretty reasonable, but for about 200 square feet. Thank you so much. I'm going to hand it back to Gia, and then we have our headliner.
Keynote speaker. Thank you so much, Sarah. Appreciate you. I'd like to welcome Eryn Murphy up, who's going to be she's our keynote today to talk about her business, the work that she's so passionate about, that she does so well, and all of her expertise. We're very, very lucky to have her here to share her knowledge. So, hand off to you.
Oh, okay. Hi, everybody. Is this working? Hi. My name is Eryn, and I run a company called Restorative Landscape Design here in Denver. And we do ecological landscape conversions, and we have a pretty robust DIY program, as well as doing it for you or doing it with you. We've got different options. And I'm here to talk to you today about how to tackle it, if you would like to tackle it in your yard, and also to talk about some context about the way that we approach this and what we're doing and how we think about it. This comic really makes me laugh. This meme of Lewis and Clark seeing the grandeur of America and how they might feel now looking at some parts of our cities. For me, something I feel really, really motivated by is just thinking about how beautiful Colorado is and was, and what it's like to talk about bringing that beauty into our streets. I want to tell you about the shortgrass prairie. Shortgrass prairie is not something that you see a lot of around here. We see Denver, we see streets, we see concrete. But before this building was here, before colonization was here, before a city was here, what was right here was beautiful, ornamental, colorful grasses blowing in the breeze. And so many wildflowers, just like riots of groups of colors of wildflowers as far as the eye could see. Colorful bushes, birds, butterflies, bees, little foxes and bunnies. Like that's what was right here. And that was growing without anybody watering it or weeding it. Right? A great place to... Well, there's places to see it around, but it's definitely an ecosystem that has largely disappeared from the state, mostly because the flat places, the plains, where we had these prairies, we now have cities. If you live in the yellow area, including the Denver area up there, then you live on a place that used to be prairie. That used to be shortgrass prairie with naturally short wildflowers and short grasses. If you live a little bit higher, like let's say you live in Morrison, then you're in the foothills where you get more bushes and some scrubby trees. And then of course we all know the mountains because we love being here in Colorado where we leave the city to go to nature. In the mountains and to go see the meadows in the mountains. But it used to be just as beautiful right here, just in a different way. In the last 400 years, we have lost so much forest in the US that is now covered with pavement and buildings and farms and cows. In Colorado and in the whole grassland biome in the US, we've lost 62% of our prairies. And now we've got about 4%, I think, of the animals on the earth are wild. At this point, it's mostly cows and people covering the planet, So that's the situation that we're in. I think some of you probably remember being younger and driving along and having your windshield covered in bugs, and now not so much, right? The way that we interact with water is also different now than it used to be. So what we'll tend to do is water comes off of our rooftops, and then it will get funneled towards like driveways. And then from the driveways, it will go towards the street. In the street, it goes into these containment buildings where 90% containment ponds, basins, where 90% of it evaporates. So instead of the water coming from the earth to watering the ground, to water plants that only need the amount of water that naturally grow here, instead we have most of our water being wasted. And then we're supplementing it with like water for our lawns. Did I do that right? There we go. And so, of course, we have a drought situation, right? We don't have enough water coming from the sky and actually going into the earth because of the way that we move water along pavement. And we're using so much water, and we're losing less and less water as we're losing more and more water as the planet heats up, right? So the water levels in our aquifers in the Colorado River are going down and down. And we're here because we care about that, because we have to adjust to a new reality that we've created. This is also contributing to wildfire danger and our forests burning up and all sorts of stuff. When there were humans here before colonization, before things were like this, they had a relationship with the land where they were planting things that they like to eat, spreading the seeds of things that they like to eat, tending the land as kind of like this endless living garden that they were in relationship with. Then in Europe, we ended up with this kind of thing that comes from the nobility. The common people in Europe, they would have like food gardens in front of their houses where they'd be growing food to share and flowers to share with people. And then the nobility started having these big grass lawn places to have fancy parties. And then, of course, everybody wanted to look like a king and have a place to have a fancy party in front of your lawn. Then people came over from Europe to the US, and they were like, there's plenty of wildlife. There's wild everywhere in the US. The US is just pure wild. Let's have more cute places in front of our houses to have fancy parties, which is great. But there's also behind that, there is this underbelly of control, of saying like, I want my yard to look the way I want it to look for my purposes. And of arrogance and ignorance of thinking that there's no harm in doing that everywhere in the whole frickin' world. And so we end up in this situation now, right? Where every house has a lawn in front of it, or it used to have a lawn and now it has weeds, right? And we have to mow it every day and water it every day. And we're like, why am I doing this? How did I get here? This doesn't make any sense. So that's how we got here. That's why we're here. And what's particularly crazy about this being in Denver is that the second most common grass in the Denver area before colonization was buffalo grass. Buffalo grass only grows naturally like 6 inches tall. This is me standing in my buffalo grass lawn that I have never mowed, ever. And it doesn't need long-term supplemental irrigation because it was growing here before anyone was watering it. So we have a native grass that doesn't need water or mowing, but we're not using buffalo grass. Instead, we're using Kentucky bluegrass that we have to water and mow every week. It's like the epitome of human comedy. But we're all like, we're learning about this together, right? We're figuring this out. Oh, we've been doing something dumb. Maybe we can do something better. It's an ongoing growing up process that we're in together as humans. However, I just want to say that being on the earth right now is like can feel really intense. Engaging with this landscaping process can feel really intense because all of these systems are designed in a way that are self-destructive, right? Where we're creating problems for ourselves, we're getting in our own way, and we have for generations. And now if we're trying to figure out how to do something different, we're doing that on top of the mess that's already been created. So my question for you is, like, in the middle of all of that, what do you personally want to do? What are you curious about? What are you interested in? Maybe you're interested in having more food in your yard that you can share with your neighbors, or maybe you're interested in bringing back some of that beauty and those butterflies, or maybe you're just like, I don't know, my yard's a mess. Can we just make it less awful? You know, like whatever it is, I want to be here to support you with that. And I just want to say that we're all, like, you each have your own reasons that you're here, and your own reasons that you're connected to that. And that's great, because it takes an army of diverse interests. And you're not alone, because not only are so many people in Denver trying to figure out how to do this at the same time, but also there's this very rich history of all of these amazing plants that love growing here and that do so well here, and they're just waiting to meet you. The last thing I want to say in my context setting before we get into logistical stuff is just that all of the stuff that got us into this situation, like bumbling around on the earth, creating systems that don't work well and create waste and trying to control things and getting impatient and getting overwhelmed, like everything that's created this system where money is on top and everything else is on the bottom, and like stuff doesn't work as well as it should. All of that stuff is still part of your gardening journey, right? Like whatever your relationship is with the yard is going to be your relationship with the yard. You're going to feel frustrated. You're going to feel impatient. You're going to feel overwhelmed. Like all of that is part of the journey. It's just a matter of doing something different with it than we did in the past. So for example, the way I often feel about my yard is either like, I want it to look better, or I feel overwhelmed by the weeds, like I don't want to deal with it. It's too much. How do I deal with it? And I can get kind of stuck in that in my head, right? And then it becomes like not a fun thing to approach your yard, because then it's just like stressful. So something that helps me is to just imagine my yard, and I want to invite you to close your eyes for a moment, because I'm a weirdo. You don't have to do it. But close your eyes for a moment and just imagine that like the spirit of your yard is standing in front of you, and they, look however they look. They're just like personified. And if you were going to say something to them, just in your mind, what would you say to them? Like my thing that I want to say to them is like, I'm sorry I don't tend to you more. And then what do you think that what do you feel in your mind's eye? What do you imagine that they would say back to you? If your yard could say something back to you? Please help. Please help. Yeah. My yard says something back to me in my imagination, like I'm beautiful. Don't worry about me, But you each have your own individual relationships with your yard, and that's what I want to emphasize here. That's part of the journey. Okay, so I'm kind of obsessed with native plants. I brought some native plants today here with me. And I want to talk to you about them because they are such a critical and awesome part of creating a lawn that doesn't need long-term water and that is going to draw tons of gorgeous butterflies and stuff like that to your yard. Native plants are plants, but when I say native plants, I mean plants that were growing here before anybody was tending them or watering them and are freaking gorgeous. Our native plants tend to have really deep roots, so they're used to periods of drought, okay? They're used to Colorado weather. They're used to like every once in a while, there's no water all summer. So their roots go down, 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 down really deep, like our native wildflowers can have like 13-foot deep roots if they've been established long enough. Like, it's crazy. They definitely need water from you at the beginning to get going, but wow, can they survive something? They are Colorado strong. Which way do I? There we go. And they're used to our crazy weather. This is I saw this meme and it made me laugh so much. This is Colorado weather forecast. Yeah. You may notice the difference between, like, let's say you have a non-native fruit tree, like a peach tree in your yard, and you have a native fruit tree, like a wild American plum in your yard. When that, that like fake spring thing that we get at the beginning where it's like, oh, it's spring, and the next week there's like 4 feet of snow, and you're like, it was the fake spring, it got me again. What you'll notice is, like, the peach tree will sometimes put out its blossoms in those first 1 or 2 fake spring waves. It's like, oh, it's spring, I'm ready. And then all the blossoms die off, and either the peach tree doesn't give you fruit, or sometimes it dies or gets injured. But the wild American plum, native fruit tree, is like, no, I've been around, Our native plants tend to look great throughout the year, and they also tend to not die in our crazy weather because they've been chilling here for forever. They are also gorgeous. Oh, this is an annual that's popping off in my yard right now called Rocky Mountain Bee Plant. I love it. I like to think that it looks like a princess and an alien had a baby. It's got like a very specific vibe to it. And something else that I really love about our native plants is so much color year-round. Like with lawns, they're pretty boring in the winter. Sometimes with annual flower gardens, they just disappear in the winter. But if you go to Red Rocks or you go to Rocky Mountain Arsenal in the middle of the winter, it's like red, orange, purple, billowing tapestry of color. It's still freaking gorgeous. The other thing that's great about our native plants is the relationship they have with our native insects. And this is something that I find so fascinating and important, and not everybody knows. Okay, so native insects, anywhere in the world, about 90% of insects are specialists who can only eat plants that they co-evolved with in their native area. What that basically means is, like, if you're a beetle over millions of years, you learn that you can digest this leaf, but every single plant is trying to change their chemistry and develop strategies to keep you from eating it, right? So you're like, well, I figured out how to eat this one leaf. I'm going to specialize in that. I'm not going to try to beat all of the fences and adapt myself to be able to eat every plant. That's too much. That's too crazy. I'm going to specialize. Not all bugs specialize, obviously. Plenty of bugs have figured out how to be generalists. But how many of you guys have heard about the plight of the monarch butterfly? Okay, so the monarch butterfly is in danger of extinction because when it's a caterpillar, it can only eat milkweed, which is a native wildflower, right? It's adapted its body over millions of years to be able to eat milkweed, but if it doesn't have milkweed, it goes away. It dies. It doesn't have the food. So what's really cool about native plants is that they are in these like tight, interconnected, interdependent relationships with our native bugs, our native pollinators, and that means our native birds as well, and everything that eats the bugs. Here is a cool monarch caterpillar on gay butterfly milkweed, which is an awesome milkweed for the Denver area. And here is a monarch butterfly as an adult on a blue sage in an HOA project we did in Lafayette. Also, if you love bees, there are native bees. Most native bees are specialists, and they can actually only eat and digest the pollen from specific native wildflowers that they have co-evolved with. European honeybees that you see everywhere, they're not like that. They can eat the pollen from any tree that they can fit in, but there are so many cute, really awesome, really unique native bees that need our native wildflowers. And if you put like a orange globe mallow flower in your yard, you might get this very special globe mallow bee who likes to sleep in the flowers after it's done eating, which is pretty adorable. Hummingbirds also, birds in general, like they have designed to be able to eat different specific plants. But more than that, they eat bugs, right? Most of what birds eat is actually bugs. It's not bird seed, especially in baby feeding time, because a baby bird is a baby dinosaur, let's be real, okay? And it's like tripling in size. In 6 weeks, it's got to get out of the nest, right? So just imagine that you're like a bird parent and you've got 4 baby dinosaurs who are like, meat, like all day long. Birds have to feed their baby birds bugs. Those birds cannot grow up on birdseed. They need bugs. And caterpillars, that's like the filet mignon. That's takeout steak in a box, right? That is the best thing you can give a baby bird. So one of the reasons why we've lost 46% of our native birds here in the U.S. grasslands since 1970, almost half of our birds are gone, is because they don't have enough bugs. And they don't have enough bugs for their babies because we're not planting enough wildflowers. That's pretty much it. They did this cool study on chickadees. We're a little short on time, so I'm going to skip it. But yeah, most songbirds need thousands of insects to reproduce and survive. Another thing that's cool about native plants is that they have really rich ethnobotanic histories, right? So the Native American people, they were and they are using these native plants for frickin' everything that you would use, something that you think of as a medicinal plant, if that makes sense, right? We tend to think like, oh, I'm planting a medicinal plant garden. I will plant lavender because it's mostly like European settlers, and we come from Europe and we brought the history of these like medicinal plants from Europe. But actually, every single native plant here practically has like some really cool use for it. Medicinal use or edible use, which is really fun to learn about. When you're looking for plants, there's a couple resources I wanted to point you towards if you are like me and you get excited about native plants in specific. Adam, can you bring up that lookbook on my website? So first of all, even though I'm talking to you with great enthusiasm about native plants, you don't have to use all native plants. There's tons of really cool, pretty plants that like this type of weather because they're native to other places in the world that have similar weather, right? So what we call xeric plants, low water plants, stuff like that. So I'm not like a purist. I'm not telling you that you can't use a cool flower that you like. But if you're like me and you're like, this native plant thing is so freaking cool, on the restorativlandscapedesign.com website, we do have this lookbook where I have pictures of some of my favorite native wildflowers that we use. If you just kind of want to oogle some flores. And if you don't have to show them also native grasses that we love. And we have a sunny and a shady section. And Adam, will you scroll back up to the top real quick? We don't have to show them the whole thing, and click on that spreadsheet or open that in the other tab. I think it's already open. The tab at the top of the screen. There we go. Okay, on that page on my website, I link to this spreadsheet, which is publicly available, and I'm also always looking for volunteers to help me build it out. Can you scroll that down a little bit, Adam? So this has every native plant that I know of that you can get commercially at retail or wholesale nurseries in the Denver area. And it has the name, the size, what color flower it has, what type of irrigation it needs in Denver, and what time of year it blooms, and some more information about it as well. So if you want to try to figure out, okay, I want some spring blooming flowers, I want some summer blooming flowers, I want some fall blooming flowers, so it looks cool and different year round, you can use this to find some information about that. So again, on my website, there's a page that says native plants, and it has a link to this spreadsheet, which is public and free. Okay, will you go back to the spreadsheet, Adam? Or the slideshow? Thank you. All right. And if you want to buy plants, the Garden in a Box program through Resource Central that Bea was talking about is fantastic. We have a program with RLD called Garden in a Truck, which will bring you tons of plants at wholesale prices. If you are like, I'm gonna spend more than $500 on plants. I want dense planting. I want a lot of plants. That's a really great option. Resource Central's Garden in a Box program is better for like smaller amounts of plants, smaller gardens. High Plains Environmental Center in Loveland and Harlequin's Gardens in Boulder are two other great nurseries that have native plants. There are a lot of nurseries around Denver where you can find some native plants. I'm just naming these because these places specialize in them more. But they're definitely, if you're wandering in a nursery and you're like, is this plant native? I have no idea. Of course, you can Google it. You can also search on your phone to see if it's on my spreadsheet. Okay, so one of the cool things about native plant gardens is that they can look any way you want them to look. Like, it can reflect your unique style, your unique vibe. This is a crevice garden with a kind of classic xeriscape look with like spaces of gravel in between the plants. This is an RLD project we did. But it can also look more like a prairie restoration project, right? Where it's like short grasses with wildflowers just rippling through there. Another RLD project. You could do a cactus garden. This is my backyard. This is a buffalo grass lawn just surrounded by a little ring of wildflowers. Denver Botanic Gardens has this. This is like native evergreens that they've pruned into a Japanese garden. I mean, that is sexy. And you can think about, where in your yard do you want to put a little nook or a place to sit or gather or something like that, surrounded by beauty. When you're thinking about how to design your garden, I want to talk to you about how to do it so that it's lower maintenance, if that's something you want. If you want to have a very high maintenance, fancy foo-foo garden, good for you. But I think most of us probably are lazy and busy. And just would like it to look great all the time without us doing anything. So when we think about how nature builds gardens, that's a good way to think about, nature looks good without any gardeners. You don't go up to Aspen Mountain Meadows with all those wildflowers and go like, where's the 24/7 gardener? This looks so good, right? So how does nature do it? How does it make it look so good? Well, one thing nature does is it's very dense. There's not a lot of room for weeds because there's just pretty plants everywhere, right? It's stuffed. It's also stuffed vertically, not just horizontally. So think about a rainforest. You got the different layers. You got really tall trees all the way down to ground covers. There is a plant occupying every space where it can reach sunlight. And even in the ground, every space where a root can fit, right? It's filling it up. In the prairie, we don't have trees naturally growing here, but we do have, taller plants and bushes, and we have prairie grasses, and they mix together naturally. Not only do they use up space in different ways over the ground, but also under the ground. Grass roots tend to be kind of like a net. They're very fibrous. And then our flower roots tend to be like a taproot that's just spearing down into the ground looking hungrily for the water at the bottom. And so they use up different space under the ground as well, these diversity of different plants. And together they fill all of the available cracks. And then that's why when you see an old growth ecosystem, meaning what we think of as this is pristine nature, that type of a situation, those sorts of ecosystems are very resilient. They're very resistant to weeds. It's not easy for weeds to take over them because they've got native plants growing in every nook and cranny already. There's not a lot of room. If there is room, nature will grow, right? We know that. In the forest, there's not plants growing in every nook and cranny, but that's because they have mulch and they have shade, right? So they have tree branches and tree leaves covering the ground, and that suppresses weed competition. So you can do this in your garden. That's what we do, right? We use mulch. We're kind of mimicking a forest floor there, and we're trying to shade out and cover the ground so that it doesn't get really weedy. The issue with this is that you have to keep weeding or replacing the mulch continuously wherever there isn't a plant, right? Because nature will try to grow there. The other way to do it is what we call green mulch, which means use a carpet of ground covers and then have taller plants and flowers and bushes, that are kind of set into that carpet of ground covers, like in this garden. And this is more like you're recreating the prairie, basically. The restoration garden. Traditional plantings, you have clumps or masses. So I love this picture of a garden. This is probably a millionaire's garden. I did not build this garden, but it's just so freaking beautiful and peaceful. You'll notice that there's it's like everything looks very orderly. There's like a group of purple flowers, and then a group of dark blue flowers, and then a group of grasses, and those repeat throughout the space. But the thing to think about this type of garden is that if you want this type of garden, awesome, good for you. You're going to have a great time in your garden, but it will be a lot of work because in the winter, when all those flowers disappear, there's going to be all of these empty spaces. And empty spaces in the winter and the early spring leaves room for weeds to move in. Also because when grasses and flowers grow together in kind of a tangle, did we miss one? I wonder what happened there. In kind of a tangle, then they fill up more spaces more tightly. This is a different option to the mass planting or the traditional planting where you do it in those big clumps, which is called a matrix garden. So with a matrix garden, you'll have some kind of ground cover, like a grass, or in this garden it's a sedge, that gets repeated throughout the whole space. So that's what I mean by a carpet of green, right? It's kind of tying the whole tapestry together, and then there's flowers growing among it, in between it, through it, right? And the nice thing about this is when the flowers disappear, there aren't huge gaps where there's nothing so that the weeds can come in. Here's another example. It looks very natural. This is at the High Plains Environmental Center in Loveland. It's a mix of ground covers and wildflowers in a way that looks very full, very lush, very wet, very natural. And when the flowers disappear, there's still ground covers covering the ground. So if you're planting something like this, what you might want to think about is getting grasses or ground covers and then sort of dotting them evenly through your space, like all of those black X's, pretend that those are grasses. And then putting groups of flowers kind of intertwining and winding through them. Like in this example, the red circles is one type of flower and the orange scribbles is a different type of flower. You can also do this with buffalo grass if you want something that's really, really short. Here's buffalo grass and really short flowers dotted throughout it. Again, this is always going to be lower maintenance than just flowers or just grasses, because when grasses and flowers, or any ground covers and flowers, are growing together, they work together well to fill up all the spaces, and they don't leave as much room for weeds. And it's cute as heck. The other thing that's nice about including a lot of grasses and ground covers mixed through your space is that in the winter, they're gorgeous. In the winter, you've got something going on. You've got some vavoom. So, in conclusion, more density, the more dense you plant, the fewer weeds you will have. You will also have to water less because it keeps the ground more moist when there's not just big bare patches in between the plants, right? So more density means less water and less weeds, and more diversity, and by diversity I mean like a mix of flowers and grasses or different layers, bushes, trees, ground covers, stuff like that. The more diversity, once again, less water, less weeds. So that's something to think about as you're gardening. We are going to take a 5-minute break. Do I have? Yeah. We're going to do a raffle and then a 5-minute break.
Thank you, Eryn. And that's not the end of Eryn's presentation. She has lots more to say. We just want to make sure everyone has a second to go to the restroom. Okay, did everyone get a raffle ticket when they registered? Okay, who did not? Put your hands up. Okay, Gia's gonna get you, and then we'll do and we have one on this side too, Gia. So we are doing 2 raffles. The first raffle, do you need to? Well, there's a split. Yeah, everyone has one, the mirror of it is in the bucket. So we're gonna get, the first one is a super cute weeding bucket that you can put your weeds in, and you can also flip it over and make it a stool. And my favorite gardening tool on the planet, the Japanese hori hori. So this is a gardening knife that makes weeding so much easier.
Everybody got their ticket? Got your ticket out?
Okay, you wanna do it? Okay, 906211. Who's our big winner? 906211. Yay! Cool.
All right, everybody get a good break? Okay, so we're going to talk more in the second half about like the nitty gritty logistical stuff of how do I do that? So when you're looking at your yard, you want to figure out what your microclimates are. So where's the sun? Where's the shade? Hills tend to be sunnier and drier. Dips or basins tend to be cooler and wetter. North of your house tends to be cooler and wetter than south of your house, stuff like that. So you want to pay attention to things like that. If when I have a shade garden, what I'm looking for, because I'm obsessed with native plants, is plants that are native to like the foothills or the mountains of Colorado instead of the prairie of Colorado, right? And if you use that spreadsheet that I showed you, it shows, it lists which plants are good for dry, sunny locations, which plants are good for dry, shady locations, which plants are good for wet, shady locations, stuff like that. So figure out what kind of microclimates you have, and then you can use that spreadsheet to figure out what plants go in there. You can also, just as an aside, if any of you guys are really interested in adding fruit trees, which is an awesome way to create abundance in your neighborhood and have fruit to share with your neighbors. Non-native fruit trees do have that problem where they tend to like bloom too soon because they get fooled. So one trick you can use for that is putting them on the north side of your house where they get some shade in the early spring, because then they're still shaded in the early spring and they think, oh, it's not really spring yet. They tend to bloom later. Little trick there. Something else you want to pay attention to as you're thinking about designing your landscape is water. So your roof is a giant water catchment system. You might be catching 20,000 gallons a year of water, of rainwater, through your roof that comes down your gutters. And if that water is just washing away into the street instead of watering your landscape, it's not doing anybody any good. The best thing to do is to figure out how to get it into your landscape. So people often use these rain barrels. I actually like to skip the rain barrel because I just view it as an unnecessary intermediate step and just put it straight into a swale, which I will show you what that means. But the concept is, let's move the water from our gutters into our landscape so that it feeds, especially trees. If you have trees, because remember this was prairie, so trees weren't naturally growing here. So trees need extra water. Let the water from your downspout feed your trees. And the way you can do that is by creating what we call swales. So a swale is basically a fake river, right? It's like a channel in the earth that leads the water where you want it to go. So here, you can see this downspout is emptying the water into here, and then the water moves through the landscape like this. It just looks like a cute rock river. It almost looks like it's just ornamental, but it's not. This is actually a channel underneath the rocks that we cut into the earth, right? And so then what it does is, instead of the water just dumping straight next to the foundation or going this way and then going down the driveway, it gets moved through the landscape and it waters all of the plants that are around that swale. You can also use this, you don't want water next to your foundation. So you can also use this by putting a swale next to your foundation that moves water away from your foundation into a part of your landscape where you want to put it. Let's see. We already had our break. Okay, let's talk about really getting into it. What do you do when you just have lawn or you just have weeds and you don't know how to take them out? There's lots of strategies. I made this with AI and it made me laugh. So there's, you could burn it. You could put down black plastic. You could pour boiling water on it. You could spray it. You could use a sod removal tool. There's a lot of different options, and some of them are more headaches than others. But I'm going to talk to you about the pros and cons of the different options so that you can decide what's the best option for you. Sod removal was talked about earlier. Sod removal, if you have actual sod, like actual grass, this is not going to help you if you have weeds very much because it tends to be too compacted for the tool. But sod removal is great for a situation like this where they just kind of cut it up, roll it up. The issue with this, the downside to this is, it is kind of expensive to rent it. It is kind of cumbersome and difficult to operate it. You do have to get rid of the sod afterwards, unless you flip it upside down and dry it, which, you need to cover it in clear plastic for probably 2 months to keep the grass from just growing up the other side. And there's probably still weed seeds in the dirt underneath the sod. So that's the thing. You remove the grass, but there's still weed seeds in there in most cases because a lot of this was farmland before it was lawns. So this is not my favorite method personally. Solarization is a cool method, particularly if you're on a small budget and you want to start from seed. Solarization is where you cover an area in clear plastic, and you want to do it during our hottest months, so mid-July to mid-September. You got to cover it in clear plastic, trench it, so you trench the edges and then you tuck the plastic into it, so it's tight. It's on there, saran wrap over your Tupperware kind of a thing. And then what it does is it basically fries like a magnifying glass or a greenhouse. It heats up the ground underneath. So all of the weed seeds will start blooming and then dying, blooming and dying in succession. And what you'll end up with 2 months later, you take it off, you have a thin layer of compost and no living seeds in the top 2 inches of your soil. So in that case, if you want to do something like establish a wildflower meadow from seed, it's pretty easy because there's not a lot of weed seeds in there already. However, this has the disadvantage of being butt ugly for a while, which is not great in your front yard, right? But it is a good option. Growing from seed in general, just as an aside about growing from seed, if you just take a bunch of wildflower and wild grass seeds and you scatter them, they're going to come up mixed in with all the weed seeds and you're not going to know which is which, and it doesn't work that well in my experience. There are ways to do it if you're patient and you continuously mow and spot spray and stuff like that, but it doesn't work so well unless you solarize. Solarizing is a good way to do it from seed if you're on a budget and you want to do it from seed. And you can also just seed if you are using grass, because if you want to do just grass, just a native grass lawn with no flowers, because there are non-toxic selective herbicides where you sprinkle it like granules and it keeps broadleaf weeds from sprouting, meaning it keeps weeds from growing amid the grass. But you can't use that if you want a mix of grasses and flowers. You can only use that if it's just grass. I do have an ebook online that talks about that in more detail. I'm just going to mention it as a good option if you're I want a buffalo grass lawn, but I want it cheap and I want it easy. This is a friend of mine in Centennial who did his whole yard. He solarized it and then did it from seed, mix of wildflowers and grasses. So this look isn't for everybody. Personally, I'm very wowed, but it's, it's all about you and what's best for you and what's going to work for you. Another option is smothering. This is a old permaculture technique where you're kind of recreating this forest floor environment. You can use something like cardboard or newspaper at the bottom after you weed whack or mow the space. Then you put wood chips on, and you have to put enough wood chips that it will keep the weeds or grass from going up from underneath. So really, it needs to be like 4 inches of wood chips, because if you put 2 inches, the grass is just gonna go right through. So this is a lot of work. You can get wood chips for free from Chip Drop. Just Google Chip Drop. They'll drop them at your house. When an arborist takes down a tree, they turn it into little wood chips and they'll drop it at your house for free. But it's a lot of work to shovel that much mulch into your yard. Our native prairie plants also, if you think about a native prairie plant, they've been growing here for millions of years, never seen a tree in their life. And then you put them in an environment where they've got like dead trees up to their neck. They're like, what's going on? So in my experience, our native prairie plants don't love being planted in environments where there's 4 inches of wood chips, but this is still a great ecological way to prep your lawn, and I'm just trying to give you the options. The other option that I get to talk about is herbicide. Now, I'm an ecological landscaper, so when I start talking to my clients about herbicide, about 50% of them have conniption fits. But what I want to do is give you all the possible tools, and you can decide which tool is best for you. I started out not using herbicide at all, and now I use very specific products in very specific ways that is much easier and faster and cheaper than the other ways. So I'm going to talk about it. You guys probably know about Roundup and how it's used in our agricultural system, where they mass spray it on all the plants that they genetically engineer so that the crops don't die, but then the plants soak it up, and then we take in that herbicide into our bodies when we eat the plants, and it's not good for us, right? That's why there's the whole organic food movement and everything like that. The way that Roundup is used commercially in the agricultural system is super toxic. The active ingredient, Roundup, is 15% something called glyphosate, and then 75% unregulated filler chemicals. But glyphosate is actually a fairly gentle herbicide, and what that means is that the bacteria in the soil will eat it and break it down, somewhere in between 3 weeks and a year, depending on how healthy your soil is. Okay, the microbiome of the soil will digest and break down the glyphosate. So one option is you can spray glyphosate on your yard, and over a 2-week period, it will kill all of the weeds and grasses that you spray it on. It doesn't leach, so it's not going to kill a nearby tree that you don't spray directly. It's just going to kill what you spray directly. And then you can come in and plant the healthy plants that you want to plant. So this, for example, is at the High Plains Environmental Center in Loveland. This area was sprayed by glyphosate, and now it looks like this, right? It used to be invasive weeds, now it looks like this. So when I'm spraying glyphosate, I like to think of myself as in the sacred role of the reaper, where I am applying the chemotherapy or the antibiotics that is temporarily destructive, but is creating a long-term canvas for health. So if you have a problem with chemicals and you don't want to do this, that's fine. But if you want to push your edges, feel your feelings, talk to your yard about it. You don't have to buy Roundup. You can buy 41% glyphosate from Amazon. And just be smart about it. Don't get it on your skin, wash it off your skin. If you get it on your skin, don't spray it when there's wind around. You don't want it whipping into your face. Don't put it in a river. And if you have a lot of flowers in your yard and you're gonna spray those flowers, maybe pick the flowers first so bees don't land on it while it's drying. Glyphosate is considered non-toxic to touch once it dries, but while it's still wet, it's toxic and you don't want to touch it or eat it, or have anyone else touch it or eat it. So there's just, some smart ways about how to use it. We usually spray it twice, and it takes about 2 weeks to kill everything. And again, you can buy it from Home Depot, you can buy it from Amazon. It's cheap, it's easy, it's fast. The one thing that's nice about glyphosate that I especially like if you have a lawn is that if you spray your lawn, then you have a dead brown lawn. And instead of like scraping that up and tossing it away, if you just plant straight into it, that acts like a natural weed barrier, right? It's like a carpet of dead grass that will keep weeds from growing up. So it's actually a really low maintenance way to kill your lawn and then plant something new. Okay, so now that you have used one of those methods to remove what was there, and I really do recommend that you use one of those methods, because if you just start planting new things and watering new things, you're going to have so many weeds coming up, it's going to be overwhelming. It's better to deal with the weeds or deal with the grass before you start planting new things. So use one of those methods, depending on your site. Step 2 is to figure out what plants you want to put in there. Now, you can use, if it's a small garden, you could get plants from the Resource Central Garden in a Box, so you don't have to pick them. If it's a big garden, you can use our Garden in a Truck program. I have this thing on my website where you tell me information about your yard, and then I pick plants for you for your yard. It's great. And bring them to you in a truck. If you want to pick them yourself and you want to find them at the nurseries, you just need to pay attention to, putting a plant that likes sun and dry conditions in a sunny and dry spot, et cetera, et cetera. I would also recommend don't pick like 50 million different species, because it will look like chaos. And part of us working together to create new beautiful Colorado-scapes is like trying to make sure that your neighbors like them. Yeah. So it tends to look more orderly when we have something growing in every season and looking gorgeous in every season, but not too many different species of flowers at once, right? So maybe if you have space for 10 flowers, instead of having 10 different flowers, have like 3 groups of 3 of that flower, because then it looks more orderly, it looks more peaceful, it looks more purposeful when you're looking at it. Don't forget ground covers. Grasses, our native grasses, are awesome for sunny spots. If you have a shady spot, you can use wild strawberry, pussy toes, sedges, creeping Colorado holly, stuff like that. And you can find out more information about those options on my website. And don't forget to have, some textured, tall, structural stuff that will look cool and have colors in winter. And I would say lean towards stuff that's shorter and less aggressive. And again, you're like, I don't know this about any plants. How am I supposed to figure that out? But on that spreadsheet I show you, it has all of that information. So if you're like, I would like a short pink flower that blooms in spring, you can just search the spreadsheet and you will find that. Okay. Then the next step is to determine your dominant strategy. Do you want, I don't know why that picture is gone, but it's gone. Do you want, that's weird. If you want to have more space between your plants, right, like 2 to 3 feet between each plant, then you will have to weed more in between the plants, but it's cheaper to do fewer plants. And it has a specific look where you can kind of see the full canopy of each plant, and you can put them in clumps. That's more of the traditional way of doing it. I'm really into matrix gardens, which is where, it tends to be denser and we have a mix of grasses and flowers. Here's an RLD matrix garden in its 3rd year in Wheat Ridge. Has a more natural look and it's lower maintenance. So figure out what your strategy is. Don't forget, horizontal as well as vertical density. You want to have some taller stuff in there as well. Colorado does that so well, doesn't it? And let's talk about mulches. Okay, so if you want to use wood mulch, just remember that you either need to have a really dense planting with lots of ground covers, in which case you don't need wood mulch in the long term because those ground covers will take over everything, or you have to replace that wood mulch because it's going to break down every 1 to 2 years. I am a really big fan of gravel mulches, particularly this stuff is called chip rock. So if on your phone, if you go into Google Maps and you Google landscape supply, you'll find these depot places like Bedrock, Ewing, places around here where they have giant piles of mulch, giant piles of stone. One thing they have is this stuff called chip rock. It's small like pea gravel, but it has rough edges so it knits together really well and it doesn't roll over your sidewalk whenever it wants to go for a stroll. It keeps weeds out much better than big rock. So I don't know how many of you somewhere on your landscape have rocks on the ground, but the rocks are like big rocks like this, and weeds just like grow in between them and through them. Yeah, and there's probably like landscape fabric underneath, and it's probably a nightmare, right? Yeah, so small gravel mulches like squeegee, pea gravel, chip rock, anything that's a smaller diameter, that stuff knits together better and it doesn't let weeds through as much. So this is what I consider the ideal mulch, is chip rock or anything that's like that. Here's a beautiful garden at Prairie Depot Park in Edgewater that used chip rock as mulch. I do use wood mulch a lot in the context of dense plantings. So what I mean is you start with wood mulch at the beginning when the plants are small and there's lots of room for weeds. Thank you. And then over time, it all grows in. Doesn't have to look like this, but this is the prairie garden at Botanic Gardens, which I personally love. This is very grass heavy. But the point is, once your flowers and grasses grow in, if you plant really densely, like one plant every square foot, something like that, then you don't need wood mulch in the long term because you just have this kind of green carpet that the flowers grow up through, or just grasses if you want just grasses. Weed barriers. Okay, so I am on a crusade to eliminate the plastic weed barrier from the world. Yeah. They're terrible. They're just terrible. So plastic weed barriers are great because in the short term, they keep weeds from growing through. And you're like, that's fantastic. My garden has no weeds in it. Then what happens is the weed seeds blow in and start growing like on top of the weed fabric, and the roots get tangled in it. And then when you try to pull it out, it pulls out all the fabric too, and it pulls out the plant that you do like. And then you're just looking at black plastic in your landscape. And we spend a lot of time pulling out black plastic weed fabric, right? But we do need something there to help hold down the weeds at the beginning, because at the beginning of a low water or native plant garden, you are watering it a lot because you got to help those plants get established. And while you're watering a lot, those weeds are just going to love it, right? So what we use a lot, and if you have, let's see, if you have a really nice turf and you spray kill it, you probably don't, that acts like a natural weed barrier, so you probably don't need to add another weed barrier. If you solarize, you probably don't need to add another weed barrier. But in most cases, we will end up using something as a biodegradable weed barrier that's temporary. So famous things that people use for this is cardboard and newspaper. I don't know the last time you saw a paper newspaper, but they're a little bit hard to find. If you can find like a cute old lady on your street who has like been hoarding them for a while, you are gold. Those are fantastic. Cardboard is like, if you imagine trying to cut holes for plants inside cardboard with a utility knife, it takes a while. What I use is this stuff you can get at Home Depot called X-board, and it's cardboard that comes in rolls, basically. It's like thin cardboard that comes in rolls. So you just roll it out, you stake it down, you cut holes in it, and you put the plants in the holes. And it keeps the weeds from coming up in the short term. And then in the long term, if you have a dense planting, if you have a lot of ground covers, then you don't need a weed barrier in the long term. People ask me a lot about amendments. With native plants, you don't usually need amendments because they like this soil. They've been growing in this soil for forever. There are some situations if you have extremely compacted soil, if you're having really weird results in your garden, you might want to do a jar test or get a soil test and figure out what amendments to use. But for the vast majority of our projects, we do not. What? 2 minutes? Okay. We do not use amendments. And let's talk a bit about irrigation. Okay, so it's a low water landscape. If you're using xeric plants and if you're using native plants, again, they were growing here before anyone was watering them, right? So it might not be worth it to like install a drip system or install a sprinkler system if you don't have one. You can just water them to establish them, which is something like, you're basically watering them for the first 3 months, but I'll show you a schedule. It's not that much water. And then they're pretty much good. The exception to that is that sometimes we have mega drought summers and that your plants will be happier with more water. If you have sprinklers, I would say definitely just use your sprinklers to water the new plants for sure, and then you can decide whether to water them again with your sprinklers in the future. And switching to a drip system is also awesome, but it takes a lot of plastic, so it's kind of like, if you have sprinklers, maybe just use the sprinklers. I'd say a drip system is really, really great if you know that you might not be there all the time and you might not have time to like go out and hand water your garden if we have like a crazy summer of drought, stuff like that. And obviously it also makes establishing them easier. Picking the right plants for the right places is the best way to eliminate or reduce your watering needs. Let's see what else. Okay, if you are going to do long-term irrigation with low water plants or native plants, you should only be watering like once a month or once a week max in the long term, right? So if you do want to do a drip system or you do want to use your sprinklers in the long term to water your garden, it's not going to be that much water. If you do want to do it, I won't go into all of these details. I'll just say, no, we'll skip all the details because we're running out of time. Swales are also a great way to add irrigation to your system. Remember we talked about this? You can add little like rock rivers that use the water from your gutters. Just make sure they point away from your house. You can always test that by putting a hose on it and seeing which way the water goes. If you put a hose in your swale and the water goes towards your house, it's going the wrong direction. I'm not going to talk too much about landscape design or how to make paths or something like that in this workshop. I will say that I'll just say a couple things about grasses. If you have a sunny area, buffalo grass is freaking awesome. You don't have to water it or mow it. If you have dogs, that's an African sort of cousin of buffalo grass. It's very, very similar, but dogs can run on it all day and pee on it, and it's fine. So dog tough grass is great for that. Blue grama is a keystone grass for our area, but does need to be mowed every once in a while. If you have part shade and you want grass, I'd suggest sheep fescue, which also doesn't need to be mowed, naturally short, or fine fescue blends. If you have full shade, you might want to look at tall fescues, or there are new versions of Kentucky bluegrass that take much less water than the old versions of Kentucky bluegrass. So there's definitely better lawn options than what is mostly out there. Here's an example of sheep fescue that my client seeded and then never mowed. Well, I mean, in that picture, it's not mowed. And isn't it cute? It's very cute. Let's see. Oh, this is a dog tough lawn RLD project. And the one thing to know about dog tough and buffalo grass, the lowest water grasses that are good for lawns in this area, those are all warm season grasses, which just means that they go brown when it's cold. That's what's native to this area. So if you want a sunny, low maintenance, low water lawn, the best options are all ones that go dormant or brown during the winter. This is my buffalo grass lawn in winter. You can see that it's brown, but it's not dead. That's just the natural adaptation for grasses that are native to this area. Okay, we're running low on time, so I'm going to see what I can skip. If you are really excited about creating habitat for bees or bugs, you can put stumps, logs, rocks, different types of terrains, gravels, soils. Basically, the more diversity you can think of in there will create lots of homes for different cool critters. I am obsessed with building crevice gardens, which are really gorgeous. I'm proud of this one. And not only do they create beautiful rock art, but they also do create some cool homes for native pollinators. And our native plants love growing in rock gardens. If you want more birds in your landscape, put a bird bath or a bird bubbler, which is like a lower maintenance version of a bird bath, something like that. You will get a lot more birds. Timeline. If you don't have sprinklers or drip irrigation and it's a sunny, dry spot, I would highly suggest planting in the spring or the fall, not in the heat of the summer. You can plant in the summer if you have automatic irrigation or shade. You just have to be a little bit more careful about it. We usually plant about like mid-April to the very beginning of November. That's pretty much your window. When you're installing, you want to do your earthworks first. So what that means is if you're gonna like dig a swale, like here, to take that water from those downspouts and move it through your landscape, you want to dig the swale first, which looks like this. Dig a channel, fill it with rocks, or you can plant straight into it, or fill it with wood mulch if you're okay with refilling it. We usually fill it with rocks. You can use different types of cobblestone for different looks. You can have it lead to basins next to trees that water the trees. You can also use berms to catch the water. So like if you're on a hill and the water's going this way, instead of just having it go totally off your landscape, put a little berm, put a little hill there, and then the water will hit that and sink down in. Yeah, so there's different ways to think about capturing water in your landscape. That's what you do first. If you're gonna do something to your irrigation, I would do that second. Otherwise, the next thing is your weed barrier. So again, we roll out, recycled paper or recycled cardboard or newspaper, something like that. You want to put that down and then arrange your plants. So your plant arrangement, I should slow down for a moment because this part is important. The garden in a box gives you that little diagram that's like, put this plant here, put this plant here. That diagram doesn't always match what your yard looks like, right? So it's not always super useful. But basically, the art of plant arrangement is not that difficult. You want to start with the stuff that's going to be most interesting in winter, that you're going to see in winter, because in winter you will only see those plants, right? So if you have some little blue stem grass that turns red in winter or bushes or something, put that down and think about how you want to arrange it. And then after that, okay, so tall, anything that's really distinctive, really texturally distinctive, you might want to arrange those first. Think about how it leads your eye through the landscape. If you're doing a matrix, by which I mean if you want to try that strategy of having a lot of ground covers so that it keeps the weeds out year round, just kind of space those out evenly through the space, like these X's. And then you want to weave flowers in groups through them. So when I say groups, what I mean is when you look at a natural landscape, you'll notice like, oh, the blue sage is there, and then it's there, and then it's there. And my eye follows these patterns and waves through the landscape. When you look at a beautiful garden, you'll say, oh, there's a group of yellow, and there it is again. There's orange, and there it is again. And that it like has a very soothing effect on us, as well as letting our eye travel through the space. So after you put down the ground covers, if you're doing a matrix, then start to put these groups and drifts of flowers through it, and I'll show you better what I mean. If you're not doing a matrix, again, you want to say you put a group of yellow there and a group of yellow there. You still want to use this group and drift strategy. What that looks like if you were drawing it out, here you go. What that looks like if you were drawing it out is notice how like this green splotch is a group, and then that splotch repeats here and here and here. And maybe each of those is like 3 plants, right? So let's say that you have 20 sunflowers. You're gonna break those into groups of 3 or 5 and put them in different areas of your yard so that it kind of ties everything together. So that's what you wanna do with your plants. If you have a very small space, you might not have 20 of one plants, but I would still suggest grouping them. Like let's say I just have 3 Rocky Mountain penstemon, just put them together so that when they're blooming, you're like, wow, penstemon. It really catches the eye. It also helps pollinators find them easier when you group the same flower together instead of just having them like randomly scattered around. You might also want to think about adding some annuals, biannuals, or what we call short-lived dynamic fillers. That means plants that will be showy early on, because low water plants and native plants, they tend to grow slow in the first couple of years. They're really focused on establishing their roots. That makes sense if you were a local plant to this area and you knew that like mega drought could hit at any time, you wouldn't be like, I'm going to be showy right away. You'd be like, I got to survive, right? So they focus on root growth for the first couple of years, which means it's not always that interesting looking at the beginning, but you can use some of these like easy reseeding flowers, which again are listed on that spreadsheet, to create color early on. When you're planting, you want to break up the root ball a little bit so that you can help those roots get into the soil. I really like these augers, which attach to drills. It's auger, A-U-G-E-R. You can buy them on Amazon, Home Depot, places like that. They attach to drills, and you can just drill holes into your yard. We have a giant auger. We call her a Xena warrior princess. That's Wasoon, my friend, but the machine itself, we call her Xena. They do, you can get those at Home Depot too. They're a bit more expensive, but they're great for big holes. The other fantastic tool I would recommend for the actual planting is your garden knife, your Hori Hori. Just brought this to protect myself from stage fright. These are great because they have these serrated edges and sharp ends, and so you can use them to like dig into our hard soil. They're really, really highly recommend these as a planting tool. Hori Horis. And last, so now you've got all your plants planted, you dug them all into the holes, you put it on top of your biodegradable weed barrier. All you have to do is mulch now. Put that around the plants, and then you can celebrate. Yeah. Okay. Almost done. We're at 12. Quick notes about maintenance. I don't necessarily have to talk about all of this. What do I want to talk about right now? I think the biggest thing is that, like, if you're establishing a natural garden that has a lot of ground covers and a lot of flowers, like, you need to give it time to come into its own, and you also get to kind of like observe but be hands off, right? You don't have to constantly weed it if you establish a garden like that, but you do need to keep an eye for when invasive weeds try to come in, or one thing may try to take over something else. The plants will probably move around in your landscape while they're looking for like, oh, this is my perfect spot right here over time. And so with natural gardening, you kind of let them do that. It's a different approach than like the constant maintenance approach, and requires some patience. So this is the first year of an RLD garden, and you can see that 1 year in, you can see that the plants are still pretty small. They've just grown a little bit. Then by the second year, they start to, look nice. And by the third year, there's now not so much space where weeds could come in. It's much fuller. Irrigation schedule. I will skip this, but there is a suggested irrigation schedule in my ebook. I would suggest not overwatering plants. My client accidentally overwatered this Maximilian sunflower. It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen in my life. And the sidewalk is completely impassable. And the other thing to think about maintenance, if you are planting native plants that are going to draw pollinators to your yard, is that we do have a bunch of native bees that sleep inside the stems of the plants during the winter. So if you cut everything back during the fall, not only can birds not eat the flower seeds, but also you're probably just like throwing away butterflies and bees that are sleeping inside or attached to those plants, and you don't get to look at the seed heads and like the shapes of the plants during the winter. So I highly suggest cutting back your garden in the late spring, not in the fall. Enjoy how it looks in the winter, and keep those pollinators safe. Enjoy the seasonal changes. And finally, this is not going to fix everything. This is not going to fix everything, but it still matters. Us doing what we can with our little slice of earth in our front yard still matters. You can still create something beautiful that inspires people and makes them feel like their home is beautiful, their street is beautiful, like they're in a slice of Colorado in their front yard. And we are all connected through nature, right through these fractals, through these natural systems that connect us. So when you do something little and important in your yard, it ripples out. Okay, that is my whole presentation. Thank you guys so much. We're gonna do a little Q&A. I also wanted to mention just a couple things. I do have an ebook, which is currently just an 85-page PDF. Maybe this winter I will turn it into a nicer book. But it's available for sale on my website, and it has more details about everything that I talked about. My website has a lot of free resources, and there's business cards here with QR codes that link to my website. What else was I going to say? Oh, 2 more things. 1, if you want to hire me, we are full this year. But if you're willing to wait and do the planning over the winter for next year, come talk to me. And let's see what else. Before we do Q&A, is it okay if I prompt this, or do you want to say something before? Okay. Before we do Q&A, I just want to invite you to talk to your neighbor for like 1 minute and just get out all of the things that you want to say that you're very excited to say right now, okay? And then kind of self-assess or assess with the person you're talking to about, do I have a question that is probably going to be helpful for the whole group or a significant amount of people? Because I know you're all very excited to talk to me about your specific yards, and I would love to talk to you about your specific yards. But we're just going to take a short time to talk about some questions that may be applicable to lots of people. So take a moment and chatter among yourselves.
I'm counting. Everybody's like, yeah, plans! Woo! I love it. I love this chatter. Okay, 2 things before you guys head out and we do Q&A. On the back of your note sheet, there's a QR code. This is a survey that goes to me and my team to let us know what you think about this workshop. What did we miss? What was weird about the parking garage that you were like, it would have been really nice, Gianna, if you had been out there to tell me to go this way and not that way? Definitely. I want to know your thoughts and feelings, so please let us know how you feel. Let us know about the content. Let us know how good it was. I love to hear that as well. And thank you for being here. Second, when you leave, each person is going to get 1 pair of gardening gloves. We have those for free at the back. 1 per person as you leave. But we're going to get into Q&A. If you need to leave, totally understand. And we're going to go for 10 minutes. And then if you have lasting questions after those 10 minutes, you can come up, form a line for Eryn, B, or myself to ask. Cool? Great. Who has, right here. If you can just lift your arm up for me if you have questions. And now instead of standing here like this the whole time, I want you just to go like this and put it by your face. Because then I can see that hi, I have a question, and I'll know to come find you.
She's more likely to pick you if you also blow her kisses.
And Taylor and I are going to come bring you guys mics, okay?
So how do you repurpose an irrigation system that's meant for a lawn? You just cap it, or do you repurpose it some way?
Is it sprinklers? Yeah, and it works. Yeah. Congratulations. Yeah. So yeah, I would use the sprinklers to establish the plants, which I skimmed over the irrigation schedule, but that's usually something like you're watering them once a day for the first 2 weeks, and then you start to cut back to 3 times a week for a couple weeks, and then once a week for a couple weeks. And it's not a ton of water with these low water plants in the long term, but using the sprinklers for that is really great. It saves you a lot of labor. The existing ones, yeah. If you want to use those in the long term, what you can do is install higher sprinkler pop-ups, like 1-foot pop-ups instead of 4-inch pop-ups, because then they can get over the top of the taller plants, right? So I used to convert sprinklers to drip systems a lot, and then I realized, we're not watering very much anyway. That's a lot of extra plastic and money to install a drip system. Just pop up the sprinklers higher.
Where my little hands at? Let's go right here. Taylor's going to help this side of the room, so look at Taylor over here.
When solarization, you mentioned clear plastic. I've also seen dark plastic. Is there a major difference, or?
Excellent question. Yeah. So dark plastic doesn't work as well as clear plastic here in Colorado because we do have such intense sun. If you use dark plastic and you take like 6 months where like you put it down and then you remove it for a week, you put it down, then you remove it for a week, and you do that for 6 months, that will work. But you do need to remove it every once in a while so that like another round of weed seeds can come up. Because think about, there's like multiple rounds of weed seeds in there, right? The clear plastic is nice because you water the ground heavily first, you put that clear plastic in, and then those weeds just like sprout, die, sprout, die, sprout, die, because they're like, it's warm and it's wet and it's humid, it's in this like greenhouse environment, and then I run out of oxygen and I run out of space and it gets too hot and I die. So yeah, in my experience, the solarizing from mid-July to mid-September thing with clear plastic works really well. You can use painter's plastic from Home Depot, but then you have to patch it up every once in a while and you got to throw it away at the end. Or you can use greenhouse plastic, which you can reuse or sell at the end, but is kind of expensive because it's thicker.
Are there any apps available where we can take a picture of our lawn, plug in what we're looking for, and then an AI-generated version will pop up?
Oh, I have no idea.
Okay.
Yeah.
She says ChatGPT. Cool.
I was wondering if you're going to use glyphosate and you have like a big cottonwood tree or a cherry tree and there's grass around it, like how do you make sure you don't kill the tree?
Yeah, so as long as you don't spray the leaves of the tree directly, it won't leach, it won't leak once it dries. So you can spray the grass around it. You just don't want to, you don't want to spray while it's raining or right before it rains because then it can move around.
I spent the whole summer like pulling turf from my yard and I just wish I would. Yeah, sod removal around tree roots is also really difficult. So spraying is a good technique for that. And you can't solarize in shady areas. So if you have a shady area with lots of tree roots, it's kind of like either the 4 inches of mulch smothering thing or spraying. Those are really your two best things. Or you rent goats for a year. I didn't mention that one. Oh, sorry.
Do you have any guidance for us on landscaping with fire risk mitigation, reducing the risk of fire?
Yeah. The 5 feet closest to your house is the most important. I would say, with fire mitigation, it really depends on how high risk your specific property is, and trying to balance.
Everybody is at risk.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. Everybody is at risk, yeah. It's kind of a personal choice, right? So specifically, like I have a house in the mountains and we took down all the trees within like 30 feet of the property and we're just doing 5 feet of gravel around the house. And then in between that 30 feet and the 5 feet line, we're just doing things that are not really flammable. So like junipers are basically just torches. But something like a native grass tends to be keep more moisture inside of it. And so that's like what I would do for the mountains. And then here in the city, I don't personally do a lot for fire mitigation for my property, but when people are concerned about it, we'll generally do like just fire-wise plants, which means plants that hold a lot of moisture in them, and gravel closer to their house. So for example, cacti have a lot of water inside of them, so they're more resistant to burning. So putting cacti right next to your house foundation is better than something else.
Hi, Eryn. What would be something someone could do who doesn't own a house or property, who are still interested in helping?
Such a great question. Yeah, such a privileged thing, I would say, it depends on your situation, right? You could certainly you could try to talk your landlord into doing something. You could contribute to a community garden or a community orchard. You could volunteer for native plant. There's lots of cool nonprofits around here that grow native plants, that do invasive plant removal, things like that. I think it depends on you specifically and what your best options are. Yeah, for sure.
Oh, hi, and thanks. Really enjoyed the presentation. I was wondering about because the question I had had to do with soil, right? In other words, do you spend, I know you mentioned you don't do a lot with amendments, but do you do anything with, fungi or vermiculture or anything to, in that vein?
Yeah, I don't currently, but I'm actually talking to a company in Boulder that like grows this mushroom stuff mixed with mulch, and I think next year we're gonna like mix it in with the mulch on top of the plants, which I'm very, very excited about. I don't currently do that, but it's actually something we've been researching in terms of like bringing more mycelial life into the soil. Yeah, I think there's a difference also between, there's like the ideal way to do something, which might involve more amendment, more time, adding more mycelium into the soil, stuff like that. Very carefully shaking out each plant root in a bucket of water and then plopping it slowly into the very deep hole that you've dug. And then there's what I do, which is like we're planting 1,000 plants a week and we're getting them in there and they're fine, So it's yeah, there's a scale there. Okay, that sounds great.
We're going to do one more question over here and then one over here, and we'll do our last giveaway. And then if you still have more questions, come line up. We're happy to chat. I am going to boot you by 12:45 though. So again, if you don't get your question asked, please get one of our cards. I'm going to write our information up on this board as well for you to have our information, because we definitely want to hear from you. And you can use this survey as well. Cool? Okay. You're on.
Okay, thank you. It's about glyphosate again, another question. So across the street and around me, there's 3 beehives. So I have not one speck of grass in my yard. I have already xeriscaped with plants. And to use any of that killer, I'm concerned about the night moths that are coming in and the bees.
Yeah.
How long does that take to dry, and would I just be better to do what I'm doing in pooling?
Did you say?
It's already existing.
it's
It's not
already-
something
okay.
started. It's already 4 or 5 years in.
I don't usually use glyphosate in the long term. I usually just use it at the beginning. That's kind of why I think of it like chemotherapy. Like you wouldn't want to take you wouldn't want to do chemotherapy every year. That's for sure. And sometimes I will spot spray certain species, like bindweed is difficult to get without spraying. Tree of heaven, like those are 2 species where spraying is so much easier. Yeah. So I would say if you are going to use glyphosate for that purpose, you can spot spray carefully, only certain things. It does usually dry within a few hours. You can even use a paintbrush if you want to be really careful. But yeah, the other thing is like if, let's say that you want to spray your lawn and you have a lot of clover blossoms in your lawn and then you have bees nearby, if those bees come and they land on the clover while it's still wet, they can get sick. So in that situation, I would like mow and like remove all of the blossoms before I spray, because then a bee doesn't have a reason to land on something that doesn't have a flower on it.
Awesome. Thank you, Eryn. One of the things I'm always wondering about is you mentioned cutting back your garden, waiting till the spring, but is that just preference? Do you have to cut your garden back at all?
No, you absolutely don't. I mean, in nature, nobody is cutting things back, right?
I mean, but animals are eating it. Maybe.
Yeah, and I mean, what will happen, so like, for example, with an ornamental grass is like the dead matter kind of moves to the side and down, and then the new growth comes up through the middle. So it has it looks messy for a while until the new growth has fully emerged. So that's why people often cut their gardens back, is just to like have it not look so messy for that intermediate spring season.
So it's just preference and we can just leave it and let it do its thing.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you guys for your questions. I'm going to do our last raffle pull here for our last bucket and prize. And that number is 6254. Woohoo! Congratulations. Thank you guys again so much for being here. We really appreciate you. If you have questions, come up. We're happy to answer questions. If you're leaving, we just ask that you go back to the garage or go out the breezeway doors. Please try not to go wandering around campus, because then I have to come find you and herd you back. So thank you again for being here. Really appreciate you guys. Leave the clipboards and the pens on your seat, please, but you're welcome to take everything else that was left.